At this time, I'll call the meeting to order. Our first item will be approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the agenda for this evening.
Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Commissioner Ridley. Here. Bagley. Commissioner Tuesday,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore, Vice Chair, sorry, let me- Commissioner Orloff.
Yes.
Vice Chair Moore,
Yes.
Chair Newton,
Yes.
The agenda is approved. We will move on to consideration of the minutes from the January 25th, 2026 Planning Commission meeting. Are there any amendments to the minutes? Not hearing any amendments, do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Ridley,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuesday,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Ridley,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moore,
Yes?
Chair Newton.
Yes.
Next, I will be calling for public comments. This is an opportunity for public comments for non-agenda items or non-hearing items. These are items that would be within the purview of Planning Commission. Would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? Please come up, and I'll ask you to state your name.
My first.
I know that.
Andrew Thompson, PO Box 664. I'm here to talk about what you're gonna work on the STRs. I want to, applaud the going forward on the cap. I'd like to go farther. I want to support.
Sorry to interrupt, but since
Can't
that's
come
an
back
item,
in 4 hours, like,
it's actually going to be very, very soon. We had a one item get canceled. Would anyone else like to make comment? We will move on to our action items.
Could I ask if the item that was, what the item that was canceled with regard to, because that might be fine here.
Absolutely. Our item number 4, which is AA 2601, Michael Shelton for administrative appeal. That item has been postponed until the March 26th meeting, and I will be stating that on the record as well.
Okay, postponed until March 27th,
26, yes.
26th. Okay, could I know why, or is that not?
Sorry, I'll just make the announcement when it comes.
Okay.
Okay, so we have election of officers, and introduction of a new commissioner. I would like to start by welcoming Robin Risley as our newest commissioner. I know this is not your first time on planning commission, so this is a welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Moving on to election of officers. As you're aware, every year we need to re-elect our officers. We'll begin with the chair position. I am filling in for the chair tonight. We'll be calling for a nomination for chair for this year. And although it's slightly odd, I'd like to say that I am nominating Blake Newton as our chair for the coming year. Is that any other ideas? We have a second. Anyone else with nominations? Good. Okay, any further discussion? In that case, Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Oh, I'm sorry, who said first and second? I didn't hear.
I was the nomination, Robin was the second.
Commissioner Tuesday,
Yes.
Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Commissioner Ridley,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Absolutely.
Vice Chair Moore,
Yes.
Chair Newton.
Was that to me? Do I get to vote?
No, you don't.
No.
Okay, we
Sitting.
have a chair for the year, and that is Clay Newton. Next, we need to elect a vice chair. I'm going to call for a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Mickey Moritz.
Second.
Do we have any other nominees? Any further discussion? Tesla, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Orloff,
Yes.
Commissioner Ridley,
Yes.
Commissioner Matisse,
Yes.
Commissioner Sinclair,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Vice Chair White,
I abstain.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Voting is complete. Mickey Moritz for vice chair. We are now moving on to action item 4. This is a quasi judicial hearing regarding AA 26-01, Michael Shelton for an administrative appeal of the denial of development permit 25-40. This was for the consideration of a guest house at 231 East Monroe Street in a residential medium density R2 zone. The appeal will be reviewed pursuant to Cannon Beach Municipal Code Section 17.18, request for review of decision. I will note that at the end of the day on February 18th, 2026, the applicant emailed staff to request a 45-day extension to the 120-day rule and to continue the item to the next meeting, which is March 26th, 2026. At this time, this item will be continued. I'm going to move on now to our 5th agenda item. This is a work session. Review of chapter 17.84, short-term rentals, and a discussion regarding an ordinance amending chapter 17.84, short-term rentals, seeking to cap the total number of short-term rental permits to 165 per year, while abolishing and deleting references to the 5-year program. This is a reminder that the Planning Commission work sessions are an opportunity for the Planning Commission to gather and discuss information pertinent to specific topics. And it is solely at the Commission's discretion to allow public input on such topics. After a presentation by staff of the relevant material and Planning Commission questioning, I will ask the Planning Commission whether we would like to hear from the public at that time. Right now, I would ask for staff's presentation.
All right. Thank you. Jeff Adams, Community Development Director here at Cannon Beach. And I've got some slides there. And I've got to make a note, Tessa and Robert, make a note. We need to present, I need to print these off on the half room over here. So that can't see. Anyhow. So sorry about these small visuals, but we are looking forward to the new city hall in August, which will just be fantastic. So anyhow, this is a short-term rental cap ordinance 2601, and it's a work session on that. It came up. If you go to the first slide there, Robert. Next one, keep moving. Okay, that is a actual agenda from 2019 in November. The first working group, short-term rental working group that was held, in talking about the short-term rental task force that was appointed at that meeting to start, and we're talking about and this is how long we've been talking about this, is what I wanted to bring up, is that short-term rental task force meetings that started back then in 2019 with a mission statement and scope of work. And I would note that if you could see the scope of work, it says in Cannon Beach, it says areas of analysis, Cannon Beach, seeing an increase of short-term rental activity. It's a question, is Cannon Beach seeing that? If so, are they geographic concentrated? B, if so, are they related to intensity or duration of use? C, if so, are there other concerns? Two, is Cannon Beach seeing an increase in STR influence complaints? If so, and then goes on from there. Three, are there current issues with STR program? Four, what are the resident neighborhood impacts of the STR program? Five, what are the fiscal impacts of the short-term rental program? And then, next slide, please. Talks about the timing, how often was going to meet, it became a quarterly. And then the composition was 7 to 11 members, and they were specifically made up of certain segments of the public and the business sector, short-term rental owners, short-term rental operators. And that ran for a 5-year period to collect data, and that was the reason that was one of the driving forces for getting that going, because there was a lot of concern and issues about the short-term rentals. So this next slide shows you that continued. Joy has been, since 2023, we've had their city council requested amendments to be considered in November 14th to the short-term rental ordinance, including a cap of 200. December 19th, 2023, it made the city council agenda again. Held further discussion on the cap and other changes to the short-term rental program. April 9th, 2024, Planning Commission held a discussion on short-term rental regulations. On April 16th, 2024, City Council held a discussion on changes to short-term rental ordinance, including cap, ordinance requirements, violations, inactivity. July 30th, 2024, City Council requested the Planning Commission relocate the short-term rental from Title 17 zoning to Title 5 businesses. That did not go so well, from what I understand. September 26, 2024, Planning Commission discussed that relocation. It continued to October, it continued to November. December 17th, Commission considered SDR relocation and recommended denial. January 9th, we came back up at the annual retreat to bring it back, the short-term rental cap at least. And that is how we've ended up here today. Next slide, please. So this is your Cannon Beach short-term rentals from 2015 to today. And you can see it has from state steady at 200, right around 200, or even below 200 every single month. Those are monthly little tallies up there. 14-day, you can see at that bottom, our largest. Lifetime, there's around 40 of those, and that's slowly fading away. And then the 5-year program was ended as part of that task force where was part when that came about. Next slide, please. In the staff report, I've also included this, which was an Herbsworth thing from Classic County Housing Study. Next slide, please. Oh, well, you can go back just a second. But you'll notice the big blue section down there at the bottom is Cannon Beach. And that big blue section that's packing in down there at the bottom is not short-term rentals. That is seasonal homes. And so that's one thing I want you to know on the next slide. So I took back when I was here and part of that 2019 study, this came from, I think, let me see, this came from the US 2010 census, 2019 short-term rental data. And this shows a breakdown, a better breakdown, more, using census numbers, real counts, and real STR data from each jurisdiction. And this shows Cannon Beach compared to Manzanita, compared to Seaside and Gearhart. And you'll see the dark green are short-term rentals. That's 2010 data, housing data for short-term rental, dark green, or seasonal, recreational, or other, what we call second homes in the bright green. So not occupied is that slim to none. For sale only, the yellowish one. The other green color is rented, not occupied, is right here. For rent is that very little pale one there. Then you've got red, renter occupied housing units, and owner occupied housing units. Okay, and I want you to see us compared to our regional coastal comparisons. And you'll note Cannon Beach in 2010, 24.3, renter occupied 17.6, seasonal 42.7, and 11.4% short-term rentals. Let's go to today. Show me the chart. Okay, regional housing 2020 numbers, the decennial housing count numbers, exact same numbers from the previous 2010 to 2020, but now I've updated to 2026, calling around, getting their short-term rental data as well as ours, and you can see the comparison. We have now gone from 24% owner occupied down to 21.7% owner occupied, down from 17.6 renter occupied to 15.6 renter occupied, and 11.4 short-term rentals down to 10.3 short-term rentals. Where's it going? The seasonal second homes, 42.7. We've increased to 48.4. So that's what the data says. Okay, next up. Okay, this is our tax revenue from short-term rentals, and you can see that's pretty steady, heading up to around $700,000 on short-term rentals. So next up, please. Okay, so as part of that, you noticed I said in the mission of that task force, part of that mission was to collect data, and so part of the complaints, or part of that collection was in complaint. You know, that, or the whole section, what about complaint? So we had our code official back then, collect that kind of data. And so back in the day, you'll see this is 2022 city data from complaints. This is kind of what we found. So if you'll see, we track them by were they internally generated complaints or externally generated, as in the city staff complaining, or we're collecting the complaints, or are these from external sources? And you can see that split. Next up, reported. Okay, so who reported them? Self would be code official at the time, not Daniel, but the code official at the time, that was Self. Public Works, Planning, Finance, Citizens, and Anonymous. Okay, next up, type of contact, blank, so they didn't really record any type of contact, but in-person email, no contact, and phone call, we're over here. Next up, complaint types, and then here's the breakdown. So at that point in time, back in 2022, the data collected back in that time was short-term rentals, and this one right here. This is right-of-way, property complaints, parking, overgrown lot, rubbish, outdoor merchandising, noise, other business license, animal, and vehicle signs. So that's how next one, SDR related, and then you can see, this is the, ones that had short-term rental and other things, so not just short-term rental. So, you know, things that were maybe short-term rental parking issues, also to break down further of that data. So next up. And then, other things that we collected back then came from our audit, and we really drilled down into the numbers of audit. And so I'm speaking a little bit about some also to Mr. Neal's comments in here, because Mr. Neal, when I moved away, one of the things I really missed is Randy's comment. Okay, so let me just read. The staff report on this topic produces some limited data, graphs, and recommendations. However, I believe this topic warrants a more robust discussion and some additional data. In my favorite one, I gotta read this to you. This topic seems to have a financial significant impact to the town. The staff report does not do it justice. It merely states that there is a $3,500 tax impact per unit, okay? Well, one of the reasons is because we don't collect this kind of data. We don't collect down to this granular kind of data. We have some data. Code official did not do that after that 5 years kind of left. It's something that we can do. We can start collecting that back. We can start accumulating it and bring it back to a task force or whatever you want, or bring it back to you. But that's one of the things. But you know, there's data out there, you know, to answer some of Randy's questions. Maybe some of this will because it's only from 2022. It's not gonna be a change drastically because of what, you wanna go back to that slide? It shows our steady line. It hasn't changed much. So, next up, okay, so we're past, yeah, right there, rental types. Okay, so this is back, using the 2021 audit at that time, we had 14-day was 62%, 20% was lifetime, and 17 was 5 years. But remember, no more 5 year. That's pretty much going into this one. So next up, nights by type. So at that percentage, nights were 40%, 14-day, 35% lifetime, 24% 5 years. So I would expect right now we're more about 60%, 65%, in the 14-day. Okay, next up. Stays by type, 40%, 14 days, and 24, so we have about 65% stays by type, compared to 35%. Okay, next one. Stays per unit per type by year, okay? So how many stays per unit per type by year? Lifetime, 5 year, 14 day. This is taken in the 2018 audit, 2020 audit, and 2021 data. And whereas Mr. Rady said, it will be double, now it's more like triple. Okay, so 14-day compared to lifetime, it's about triple the impact for, how many, if you want to put that intense. Okay, next up, nights per unit per type, right there, next one. Length of stay per unit per type, you'll see 14-day. You've got, a 6-day, a little longer stay as compared to the others. Next up. Total number of nights by type per year, and you'll see lifetime over here, 5 year, 14-day. And so 5 years is no longer gonna be here, so this is gonna be probably twice the number of lifetime. Okay, next up. Is that it?
Yeah.
So, we do have some of that data, and, I don't think that that's that far off there. But I think it speaks to some of this that Randy spoke about, whether the tax revenues, is it, how much the impact, if you go to, Travel Oregon, they'll tell you for Clatsop County, in the latest, which was, I think, 2024, it's about $1,000 per party per stay, and that's estimating about 2 nights, per that group stay in Clatsop County for travel. And so you can get some of those numbers, but how it plays out and how that, plays out, considered that as a second home, I'm not an economist, and I'm not gonna make those kind of guesses, so we didn't put that in there. But next up, so that's kind of the last slide of the 2022 kind of numbers, comparing the numbers that we had back then. Okay, next up. Okay, keep going. All right, and so on our website, you can go to the short-term rental page, which is, if you go to our main front page, and you'll go to the business, and then you can go down, and on that, short-term rental page, if you go business, short-term rentals, you can click on our map, and you can zoom into those short-term rentals, and I think, Randy had supplied certain areas or something you wanted to look at, and, if you wanted to drill down into certain, I think the most intense that we have is likely if you go to the Center Street, Robert, if you head over to Center Street, because it has the most, lifetime units per, you can see right there, in that area, per little block, 2 blocks area. And there's others, that may have a 2 or 3 per block, but that's really the one with most, if you're especially looking at the double the intensity per thing. But as far as this, next thing that will be, that you guys, we can get back to this, if we want to bring this back, and, I want to go. Thanks for that.
Can I ask a quick question, and who doesn't know this, but. So the lifetime ones, were they grandfathered in at some point before?
Great,
So they have to stay that way, or,
they get to stay that way, yes, as long as it stays within that trust, that family or that trust.
and then the map you're showing there, those are all permitted, so if I had a concern that a place was being used like a short-term rental, I could check their
Yeah.
status.
We keep a spreadsheet and a map on there. As other areas, if you go up and down the coast, you'll see plenty of those as well. And then if you had a complaint, there's also a complaint, form on the, website. So some of the, just to kind of walk you through some of the things that have been talked about since 2019. I mean, we talked about this in our, every quarter. But 14-day is a limit, okay? I mean, the 14-day is already a limit. And so when we talk about cap, there's different ways to limit things. But the 14-day is already a limitation of sorts. So, and other districts you'll see, which is we were the only one to do 14-day, limitation that I knew of, at the time period when I was here first time. And so when I came back, I've noticed that at least one other community is starting to use that technique for limiting. Another is just a flat cap. Some areas do a flat cap. Others do a percentage of homes, 10, 13, 15% of homes. Others do a geographic limitation, maybe either by including or excluding certain. Okay, and that can be done by district, okay, so they may put in a district, Seaside, I think that is famous that they have, I think around that boardwalk district and certain districts that they allow it, but other districts they do not allow it. Some do that exact same thing by a location, in other words, an overlay type area, so that it's not just in one district, it may just be different areas and overlays. And then a proximity, some do it per block. They may say, well, you can have up to 3 or 4 per block or something like that. Others do it by a buffer type of zone, an area, say 200 feet, you can only have 2 within 200 feet or something like that. So those are other limiting things that I think Randy also brought up those points. One that keeps continually being brought up is east of Highway 101, Haystack Heights area. So no short-term rentals on that side. Twice per month rental instead of 14 days. In other words, we hear quite frequently, and even there are stats that might prefer, just from auditing and other perspectives, that it be twice a month instead of every 14 days, because it's a little confusing, a little more difficult to administer. Inactivity requirement, so let's just put it this way. So a lot of these, you talk to them, I've talked up and down the coast, in preparation for this meeting, and you'll get this comment, well, yeah, we have about 200 now, but there's only like 85 active, and you know why? Is because we put a cap on it, and so everybody got a permit, and then the other one that also they do is because they get the permits so that they don't have anybody here. So they get the 200-foot buffer, so they get a permit, they don't do any short-term rentals, they're not inactive, but it keeps anybody from doing short-term rental around them. And so these are other techniques that are being told, and, that's the beauty of like code enforcement, and us, we get to have to deal with that. So when you think about what you're doing, you got to think about what we have to do and the use of our resources. And that's not just, if you want something done, let's just say, for instance, signs, okay? If you want signs to be patrolled and to be administered, well, if you've only got one code enforcement officer out doing signs, short-term rentals, what else is all of those little things in the pie chart, think about that. So maybe resources towards that, if you're going to be going into more limitations and more things, eyes on the street type of activity, let alone the answering the calls, doing this, call back some things that we have to do on our side. So, gotta do that because you know what, it's budget time. It's budget time and I gotta. So the other thing is inactivity and then strengthen by, so the inactivity. So if you do not, so those people that do that little loophole and they want it, what some jurisdictions are doing now, well, you have to keep it, active every 3 months or every 6 months or every year, you have to show short-term rentals. And so you have to evolve that. The other thing is strengthen violation. So, we've heard time and again, at least our ordinance isn't strong enough and quick enough, to get violations or penalties. And so that's one of the things. And so next slide, please. So in the proposed amendment, this is the draft that I think was before you guys earlier or whatever. It was kind of hard for me to track because this was from Steve. Steve had drafted this up prior to me, and I really didn't change it because I didn't know what its history was with you guys and the city council. So that is the one that I proposed to you. And all that's really doing in this one, I made a few tweaks to his just to get rid of some of the stuff I know was in there that needs to get rid of, like removing, I mentioned the 5-year program. Clarification on dwellings, because we do dwellings, we do whole unit kind of things and not, kind of homestay or whatever some jurisdictions call it, or you can rent out a room or a 2-or-3 room or a floor or a level. Clarify that in language, clarifications regarding only one STR permit per property per owner, okay? Right, so you can't have, if you're an owner, you can't have 2, and you can't have more than one on one property. Short-term rental cap set at 165, for a 14-day license, or 165 14-day license. We have 154. The reason the staff doesn't go into recommendations on any of this, worry about it, because quite frankly, I think it stayed the same. I don't think it's going to grow first. I think that 14 days kind of limits the people who are doing it, and you'll notice we have decreased and it continues to decrease. And the reason I don't really go into recommendations and all that, financial balance sheets and all that is because I think it's operating as it has really for like the last 10 years, and I think it will continue to do that, at least from what I've seen. And so, I don't know if we'll ever even reach 165. That's where I'm at. But again, personally, if I were projecting this, I don't know. We're not adding enough units. If you want to go back to those seasonal and occupancy units, all we're doing is adding second homes. Because they're the primary owners and occupied renters are leaving, or they cannot stay here. They can't live. Waiting list provisions established, so we put in these waiting lists that may never procedures for selecting and notifying that's available, and then a 45-day window established for licensing. And that's really the only changes I made to it. And then, so I kind of outlaid the amendment process. A lot of people said, I got a lot of calls this week about this because they were saying, oh, no, do I need to get an application in? Do I need to, and I wanted to tell people, we still have to go through the PAPA. We still need to go through that notice period, notice to everyone, to go through the planning commission public hearing phase, the planning commission's recommendation to the city council. City council holds the public hearing, and then the city council then has consideration adoption, and usually an appeal period effective date. Sometimes even a month or 2, or sometimes even longer to establish these things. So, this is not going to happen in a month or whatever. We're not going to even probably get if you go to the next slide. I project that if you guys come to a kind of general agreements today, I could draft something up, get the PAPA, the notice into everybody, and then we would hopefully maybe hold a first public hearing in April on that. But that's likely gonna be the earliest we have a hearing on the short term. Yeah. So, I want to just kind of give you the quick rundown of it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but since this is also up to you guys on just to talk over what I've spoke about, but then talk amongst yourself. But then, you know, you're welcome to take public comment as well, so. Any questions?
I do have a question about complaints, and I noticed we have a code officer here. Do we see any pattern in complaints where we have more dense areas of short-term rental, or is it not related to density?
Doesn't seem to be related to density, though I could grab some older ones, just a blocking map, just to check for ranking selection.
I trust your instinct. Thanks.
Are you finding that there are some people that are permitted that aren't using them?
Yes.
What is the ratio or number?
Well, we have, some software that checks, for booking activity. And what I'm seeing is, in the summer of this past year, we had a 41%,
Wow,
booking activity. And so below,
that's surprising to me. Are you finding that a lot of people that are being managed by the companies having issues, or are they outside of the management companies?
it depends. We have a number of, active properties in here, whether it's with a local management company where they have a local rep and use, site to host themselves. I don't notice a significant difference.
Okay.
That's the local, companies tend to be a little bit easier to go.
My other question would be related to the question of a 14-day versus twice a month. Of the 14 days, do we have any way of tracking the data on how many days per month on average a 14-day permit currently is rented out?
I think we did that then.
Right, that would be if you had that
We could
whole
do
day.
that, yeah, and we could do that. I don't think it could be much different than that. It would probably increase maybe a little bit, but
I can find the stats, but I know it was on average 5 night stays.
Okay, that's helpful, thanks.
yeah, I think that was around 6 or 7.
Okay.
Yeah, when, folks have mentioned to eliminate the STR licenses on the east side of 101, what rationale are they using, or is there a reason for east side of 101? What's,
I think Randy has said, you know, and he noted that there was an increase, you know, I haven't gone back and looked and tracked that number, has it grown or it's substantially grown? But yeah, I think they do that because I believe that, a lot of people just see that as more, if you want to call it workforce size housing, a larger percentage of owner and renter, long-term home occupied housing over there. That's another thing I really haven't been tasked or haven't looked into that yet. Be happy to do that, bring that back for when you guys do take this to the April meeting.
Okay.
I can kind of look at that. I'm kind
I
of
see.
interested
from
myself.
that map, it seems like they're pretty evenly dispersed throughout the city, though. I mean, there's the Center Street, got a few more, a little bit higher density, but the rest of the city is, pretty well dispersed, but yeah. But I guess if we could increase the number of rentals, on the east side of 101 by eliminating STRs up there, that might be a consideration. Because, you know, I think that that's not as lucrative to have an STR license on the east side. So it might also be a further incentive for people to actually put their homes up for a long-term rental.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with questions for staff?
Maybe we have comments from,
I think we definitely should just wanted to thank Jeff for bringing back
Thank you.
data to our meetings.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
So the next question would be, is the rest of the commission willing to hear public comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, so at this time, I would like to open up the meeting for public comment. Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak.
I'm sure.
Come on up, you're first up.
Okay. Andrew Tillery, PO Box 664. In my years in Cannon Beach, I've never met a resident here that says, wow, I love living next to a short-term rental. Never, ever have I heard someone say, wow, those short-term rentals provide such a social utility and feeling of community. If it were up to me, we'd have a vote to the people of this community, whether we want them at all. But in lieu of that, that's a conversation for another time. In lieu of that, I support Randy Neal's suggestion of density. There are certain areas like, you know, on my street, which is not a very popular street, there's 3 in a row. Whether they're, you know, all operating above board, I do not know. But it just creates these chunks of dead anti-community. So I support Randy's 100-foot radius or whatever you call it. I would also say, thinking about this today, and you all are mentioning these ideas of maybe we should have an exclusion zone on Haystack Heights or the east of the 101 or wherever that is. That to me seems to acknowledge that STRs are a nuisance, that people don't want them in their neighborhoods. And that doesn't connect with me because I live on the north end. So by virtue of where I live, I'm going to be stuck with a nuisance. That doesn't seem just or fair at all. And again, I think it goes to underscore that people that live in this community aren't really in love with STRs as their neighbor. There may not be anything they can do about a second home, but you know, an STR is a business in a neighborhood that doesn't provide any social utility to that neighborhood.
Would anyone else? Right.
Michelle Alberta, PO Box 719. I agree with Andrew. I understand that running the city is often about the bottom line. As a working artist that struggles to pay rent in the winter, and I probably understand the impending bottom line more than I should. But on the flip side, as an artist, I have the power of free thinking and believe in the strength of community. I personally would love to see no short-term rentals at all. 30 days only, like many other coastal tourist towns have gone. But the ever important bottom line finds a way. For optics' sake, I'd love to see the cap push through. And I'd say that Randy's ideas are definitely a good way to contain neighborhoods we have remaining. I'm proudly part of a group named Astoria Housing for All, in Astoria, obviously. It's a grassroots coalition of community members working to address the housing crisis with the mission of creating solutions that ensure housing availability for working families, seniors, and long-term residents. When the graph that we showed you earlier, that you've seen, that's labeled number of vacant homes used for seasonal use and short-term rentals. When it's shown in these meetings, there's an audible gasp and a little bit of a chuckle when they get to Cannon Beach's number, because we're so high. I think we're 68% of non-occupied homes. By the end of the meeting, people usually end up asking me, how do people find any place to live? And my answer is always, they don't. All I'm asking is that, or saying is that we need to stop tiptoeing around and need action. Thanks for your time. That's it. Thanks.
I think it's 48%, just,
I think it's 68.
Not full time.
Yeah, not the time, yeah.
Second home.
Would anyone else like to make a public comment? What up?
I'm gonna be that popular.
My name is Brian Alden, PO Box 1061, Kennedy. I am the owner of Beachcomber Vacation Homes. We have been in business since 2014. I've been doing short-term rentals in Kennedy Beach since 2007. So I worked for Linda Beck-Sweeney, and then in 2014, my wife and I and Sally Weiss opened our own company. We currently own where Michael's Music used to be. Those cottages, we bought those in 2020. We employ 37 employees that are local families here in this area that depend on short-term rentals. We have families that come and stay. I have a family on Forest Lawn, actually 3 families that come rent the house in a 14-day license. It's all split up. They've been coming from anywhere from 15 to 28 years. There is a lot of families that come here that they feel Cannon Beach is one of theirs. and they get involved. I've had homeowners that have bought homes here. The reason they can move here eventually is they've had them as a short-term rental for 3 to 4 years. And then they relocated into that home and are now permanent residents in this area in Cannon Beach. So I'm not against a cap. I'm not against rules and regulations to control things. I just would like to see the task force brought back with people that are pro short-term, anti-short-term, and really come back to the table with some real ideas and some things that would benefit the community and the business community. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to make a public comment?
Steve Fulkerson, 3187 South Pacific. Probably for Jeff. So that's the violations data and the percentage data. What I did not see is, for example, is it, out of say 200 houses, is it the same 10 or 12 houses causing most of the issues? For example, the old 5 to 10% of the people are generating 90% of the complaints.
You know, just speaking from that earlier data, when we were looking at it before, we didn't see that. But like we said, we haven't been tracking it since 2020.
To me, that'd be the way to track it, because you're looking at broad type changes perhaps, but if it's 10 houses out of 200 and they're the repeat offenders, what happens then?
Yeah, I mean, we can, it's definitely something we can look at in the old data at the end. What we, you know, Daniel and I can look at, you know, more recent coming into this next meeting. We'll look at it.
I just think that'd be an important number to know if
I can just say.
5 or 10% of the people are causing 90% of the
Yeah.
problem. Do something with those 5%.
Yeah, it wasn't that way previously.
Okay.
So, but I can, we can look at, currently.
There are, as if I remember correctly, in the code, there are, violations. If you have a certain amount of violations, your permit is in jeopardy and can be taken away. They're also fined for those houses if they continue to violate SPR regulations, neighbor complaints, that kind of thing. They don't respond in a timely manner. Those types of issues are addressed in the code so that we can do exactly what you proposed is, get on those people that are violating.
Anyone else for public comment?
I actually came for the event that was canceled tonight, postponed, but definitely feel really strongly about this topic. I am Maria Kochi, PO Box 1132. And I'm full-time resident. I love my neighbors. I love my neighborhood and the community, and I have only, this is my 6th year here, my 6th winter, so I've only been here that long, and I have seen so many people have to leave this town because they cannot find a place to live. And, would be people who are working in any of the local businesses. I have friends who operate local businesses who cannot keep staff and can't be open the days they want to because they cannot get staff who can live here. So many young, vivacious, creative, warm people who add so much to this community. And they have had to leave one by one. I mean, so many. And that is absolutely directly because of, yes, seasonal second homeowners, but also short-term rentals. It absolutely is. Those homes, cottages, smaller places that could be affordable for some of the best parts of our community are going just for profit for some and tax revenue for the city. And it is not, it's not, but it is our loss of our community. It's such a great loss. And it happens a lot. So I hope that will be given a lot of consideration.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else for public?
We have followed up.
Perfect.
Randy Deal.
Mr. Neal, would you like to speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
First of all, there were a bunch of slides that were presented earlier that.
Oh, just a moment, can we get your address first? And
Sure. Randy Neal, P.O. Box 1092. Earlier, there was a bunch of slides that got presented that never made it on Zoom, and they're not in the packet. So I'm hoping those could get published or something.
yes, we will be sure those are published.
And then secondly, I'd like to support Brian's comment of getting the right people in the room and coming up with the right solutions. You know, my main concern tonight is making sure we all understand what problem we're solving. Maria just talked about, you know, short-term rentals are an obstacle to having affordable housing. And I totally disagree, because if short-term rentals went away, those 35, they'd just be bought by second homeowners. And, you know, Cannon Beach is sort of an unaffordable place to buy and an unaffordable place to build. So really, the only thing the cap and short-term rental restrictions are really doing are dealing with livability. And then I submitted the two suggestions. One is, you know, Haystack Heights people came, and that's what started this conversation about 6 months ago, that said they've been seeing an increase of short-term rentals in theirs. You know, we've had the issue once before on the RV park side. There's really no good reason for expecting short-term rentals to be viable or an asset to the city east of Highway 101. Yes, it might be different, you know, one neighborhood against the neighborhood in terms of who's footing the problem, but it already exists. There's only 7 or 8. And rather than let them grow, let's nip it in the bud and slice it off. Seaside doesn't allow things east of Highway 101. And then the other one is doing a cap does nothing for livability. You know, Haystack Heights may end up with even more short-term rentals. A place like Taft that already has like 4 out of 7 houses could end up being 7 out of 7 houses. So the density thing is a very simple solution to at least space them apart. So they're at least 2 homes away or something like that. And you can see by the little map snippets that I've done that there's like 30 or 40 occurrences where there's, you know, basically adjacent short-term rentals to the tune of 2 of them, 3 of them, 4 of them, 5 of them. And doing 100, you know, foot limitation on them would at least start to space them out a little farther out through the city and, you know, spread some of that density. Either it would eliminate short-term rentals, or at least it would, you know, press it farther out into places that aren't at their fair share of short-term rentals. Yeah, and then, you know, there's been the conversation about complaints and things like that. And I've looked at the, you know, our ordinance and what happens, and, you know, just a quick compare against the Seaside. You know, they have good things, we have good things, they have bad things, we have bad things. But in general, ours moves much slower, and it's much less punitive for violations. And I think that's what people come and, you know, complain about, is they submitted a complaint to code and ordinance, but, you know, the rules, the way they are stated, take forever and nothing really happens. So again, I support Brian's suggestion to, you know, let's look at it.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else online, Robert?
No.
Okay, at this time, let's move to deliberation. Who would like to begin?
I'll begin. Let's start with, east side versus west side STRs. You know, the people on the west side of 101 say, why do all these STRs have to be in my backyard? Why can't you guys, share the pain if that's what it is? With us, if there's a viable property on the east side, why can't I use my property as an STR? However, I certainly see the other side of that, which was what I mentioned earlier. They may be more apt to do a long-term rental up there. But to Randy's point, they also may just want to sell and we have another vacant home. And, you know, I've got STRs in my neighborhood, like everybody does here, I think. And I find that, really, as far as, building a neighborhood, they are really not much different than having a vacant house there. I know my permanent neighbors, I interact with them. I don't interact with a vacant house any more than I interact with an STR visitor. In fact, actually an STR visitor, I will go up and I'll ask them where they're from, how long they're staying, you know, they're walking their dog, what they're enjoying, and I give them some restaurant tips. So actually, I think versus a vacant home, maybe an STR has a little bit more value than a vacant home as far as a neighborhood feel. At least somebody's there, coming and going. Let's see what some of the other notes were. I think that, also to Randy's point, makes a good point in the affordability. I think if we restrict the SDRs, and make those homes not affordable as a recreational home, that they may just sell them and it will be a second home for somebody who can't afford it and get an SDR license, but it will sit vacant also. I'm not sure that there is, the ability to, make the kind of money while living in Cannon Beach that is necessary to live in Cannon Beach. I don't know what the solution to that is. Of course, we're looking at, different things right now that we've passed on to the city council with respect to, ADUs and, making those more affordable and, easier to build. Also deed restrictions on some of the homes. And maybe if we restrict the SDRs, those deed restrictions, could play a more vital role also. I would love to see a bigger sense of community. I would like to see more people actually living here than just vacant homes. I think that on my entire block, there are 4 of us that are there full time, and there are 21 homes. So it's definitely an issue. And I appreciate everybody's comments today and, work toward a solution.
Thanks. Other comments? Online, Clay, Les?
Yeah, excuse me. I've got a couple of thoughts. I think I'm going to mirror Randy's comment about, I'm not clear on what this rental cap is trying to solve. I know that we've talked about it for years. I even took part in some of the prior short-term rental task force meetings, ad hoc anyway. But it's not clear to me what we're going to achieve by doing it. I truly believe there is a place in Cannon Beach for a reasonable short-term rental. It's for those families that can't afford to stay in a hotel, maybe. I think they fill a gap that we need to keep. The concerns I have are more about the abuses that might occur. It really has more to do with the enforcement than, in my opinion, than any particular number of short-term rentals. I think somebody made the comment about the difference between Seaside and Cannon Beach is the pace of enforcement. It's glacial in Cannon Beach. That's an area that I would love to see some thought put into. Anyway, that's my thought. I think we need to have short-term rentals for families to come to Cannon Beach that cannot afford to stay in a hotel, or it's not practical for that type of situation. That's it.
Thanks, Les. Anyone else? Any comments? Sure.
Being a realtor, I have been selling second homes and primary homes for 35 years. And most of the people that are second homers can afford to not be in their homes all the time. They, the ones who do use the short-term rental pieces or permits, want to be able to use them when it's not being rented. I don't see any, like Randy's saying, any openings for that to help the workforce housing. I personally feel that workforce housing will have to be established through city ownership, or as Randy's suggesting, some kind of or your husband, who has great ideas about how to accomplish that. And I'm sorry, Andrew, but the short-term rentals in my neighborhood, I'm just fine with. I think they work really well. Sometimes I think the second home people that don't have permits are the biggest problem. I have one person next to me who's in their hot tub till 4 a.m. And we hear some wonderful stories, but they're not the short-term rental problem. I also would like to see that we look into the permits and make sure that the people that have them are using them. Because I think that's a shame not to do that. And just to put in a good word for the management companies, I think they're exemplary. I would like to see the cap at what it is right now, if we have to do that.
Yeah, I'll second that on management companies. Anytime I've had a complaint with any of the short-term rentals, they've been right on it. I have on 2 occasions used the online city complaint form, when I didn't get a good response from an STR that, was near me. And they responded to that also, but, the response that I've got from all the companies in Cannon Beach has been pretty immediate. They pick up garbage. If there's a outside light on, they'll contact the renters and say, hey, you know, there's a bother in the neighbors shining right in their living room. Could you turn that off? And it gets done. The nice thing about STR was, to your point also, is that they're gonna leave in a few days if they're a problem, you know, and you don't have to, put up with a regular neighbor if they're a problem for too long, you know. However, all my neighbors are pretty good. Cannon Beach is pretty good, but, that was kind of tongue in cheek that, there's been bad neighbors in here, you believe, but, the STRs, you know, at least they're only, there for a week or 2.
So, Jeff, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I was just gonna say to, both Randy's point and to Les's, Les, you're never ad hoc to anything. Let me explain. Okay, but, I just wanna say, there, just because I put up April as a proposed date, there's nothing that is rushing this, you know, you can send this to a task force, you can do whatever you want. There's no timeline on this. This has been brought back to you guys, you know, to look at and give us direction on. I just wanted to say, you know, even tonight's meeting, you know, some great questions. The reason we have public meetings. I mean, Randy's comment made me start thinking, I'd love to look at our demolition permits over the last 10 years and short-term rentals and others, because that comment about short-term rentals becoming long-term rentals or I tend to agree that that's not gonna happen. In fact, I believe it's almost could be a historic preservation, because some of these little cottages are staying short-term rentals because they have a role to play in that. If we remove that, I could be jeopardy and they'd be demolished and put in a big second home. And I'm gonna look at that. I mean, that just intrigued me to start thinking about that, number to see if we have any of that occurring. Because, I just know the demolitions I've seen lately, losing some of these older, cottages and stuff. I'd love to see if there's any trail in that, so. But there you go.
I'm just surprised around when we found out that there was, the amount of usage of those short-term rentals was 40%. And I think that's ridiculous. I think, we need to think about how can we, enforce something where it isn't being used, and if it's not being used, let's open that up for someone who is going to use it. Short-term rentals, they are income for our city, there's income for the owner, but also income for our community. And there's value to that. And I would like to continue to push for additional support for our code enforcement officials. So I think he's underhanded in all this and needs additional backing for sure. Because we can't be doing our code enforcement, looking at our short-term rentals, which is the office.
Well,
The interesting thing to me is that if only 40% are being used, that means a cap really isn't a problem, because if you just make sure that whatever is held is actually in use, you get a far fewer permits, in fact, because it sounds like for the data, without a cap, the number has been slightly decreasing over
Yeah,
time.
slightly. Stated about city.
Jeff, is there anything there, I was reading through it, I didn't see anything about the lifetime short term. Is there any regulation there when the house is sold that lifetime is terminated? Okay.
Yeah.
So if I'm hearing correctly, I hear a lot of questions from the planning commission. Are we at a point where we think this needs more analysis before moving on to suggesting bringing something back?
well, it sounds to me like there's nothing really pressing that needs to be done this evening. The caps, anything else to do with the short-term rentals, it doesn't sound like anything's on fire, right? So that might give us some time to put together a task force to look at, all aspects of STRs. I know we did that once, and we have some good data from that. The other side of that is I hate to prolong, this and kick it down the road, it seems like nothing gets done. But if there are members of the community that have further input besides just what we've heard tonight, and they want to dig into it deeper, should we give them the opportunity to do that through joining the task force?
Well, one thing I wanted to say is tonight is the membership awards banquet at the chamber, and it's being held at the Pelican. I know they have about 80 people that are there. So we may be missing an opportunity to hear from some of the people because they're getting prizes tonight. So anyway.
A lot of language, just, correction of language, short of 1784-55, which is license cap. We're talking about the elimination of the 5-year, which is already taken care of, changing rental to dwelling. A lot of it's just small language, but I agree, housekeeping, may want to continue it for a little further comment.
Well,
My understanding would be that council should convene a task force if that would be done, so we would be passing a recommendation.
Yeah, you would pass that recommendation, if that's what you wanted, but you might want to hold another work session to develop what you.
What our recommendation would be.
In fact, yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't put my hand up. I just jumped, sorry. I've been biting my tongue on this, but it seems like there's two things coming up. One is the affordable conversation, which we've had largely in our focus for a long time, trying to help figure out a very complicated situation we're in and unique along our coast. Well, more unique or more exaggerated, probably is a better way of putting it, along the coast. And then there's the nuisance section or code enforcement section. So there's two pieces to this. What ultimately are we trying to solve by taking this on again? We have taken it on many times, as Jeff pointed out. And at what point do we get into community fatigue? I mean, we have so many things we're trying to solve for. And I agree with some of the comments tonight. I don't think this is going to solve our affordable crisis in the town. And I think we could really get into a situation where we get into just more contentious conversations. I cannot imagine that work session with people coming together on that. I mean, I remember this last time, it was incredibly contentious, people very upset about it. We did come to some places, it's been some time and it's not perfect, but we've got so many other issues in front of us. A part of me is just like, why would we take this on right now? I think the question of why, Les's question is a good one. I'm not saying we don't do it, but I think we need to really, as a group, understand why we would do it. And what sort of community bandwidth do we burn at the expense of something else we're trying to get to? That's all.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I feel the exact same way. So thanks, Clay.
Yeah, I think if we were to move forward with this draft as it's written today, I can't imagine anybody getting upset because it doesn't change anything. I mean, it doesn't mean anybody can't get a permit that's got a permit. It's just a cleanup of the code. There's probably some value in something like that, but I think some of these bigger issues about, well, what neighborhoods should be allowed to have them versus which ones should be protected from them, those are the big ticket items that are going to be so controversial. And I'm completely with Clay. I don't see why we should take that on with no clearer understanding of why it's important. But I'm willing to pass it as it stands right now.
Someone in the public would like to speak. Generally, we don't allow that. That's a work session.
It is a work session. And the other thing I was gonna say to that, and what I want to remind everybody before I forget, March 5th, next week is a housing, what we're talking about, the other element that keeps coming up, workforce housing, affordable housing. That discussion, public input will be next, Thursday. Is that the 5th?
Yes, it is.
March 5th, 6 o'clock here, same batch in. And so, yeah, so that, I wanted to respond to, but the other is, yes, if you could just send it forward tonight. The one thing I would say, but from all the discussion tonight, that at least have me bring back revised language for enforcement, because that keeps coming.
Well, the one thing, I'm sorry, Mickey, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The one thing that we just, I don't know that I'm learning, I'll just speak for myself, but the one thing I would be concerned about with that, Jeff, is I'm with Les, I think this is probably okay, just if we just pushed it forward, it doesn't change much, but I do think there could be the perception that we didn't run a fair process on this and didn't have enough public comment, or people were tied up at an event or they weren't notified. I feel like we've been down this road before and we end up in so many side conversations that take us off of the master conversation that I would be very leery of moving this ahead. just for the sake of having it off our desk.
So Clay, what do you think about having Jeff come back for a second work session with some revised language around the violations? So that there's something more substantive to address in that regard.
I think it's a
Wow.
great idea. I think it's a great idea.
So if we have an interest in that, we can propose a second work session with some revised language.
Let's do that. So I move to have an additional work session where we take care of the housekeeping elements of these changes. And also put in some more robust language as it relates to violation penalties. Maybe looking at one of the other nearby communities that was mentioned, and come back at a later date to discuss this, hopefully not too soon.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Les has got his hand up.
Sorry, I missed that last.
That's okay. There was one other topic that kind of got mentioned. I think it was Jeff probably in his early thing. There's been some conversation around the language of rental every 2 weeks versus rental twice a month. That I think, based on my understanding, does merit some discussion. And I'll just throw that out there as maybe another topic that would be worth delving into at the next meeting or the next work session.
Yes, I think I've had a discussion with Brian about that, in that if you rent for Christmas, you can't really do New Year's too. So there are pieces of that that could be valuable.
So would you like to rephrase your motion to include a discussion around?
Sure. In fact, I'll shorten it up.
Thank you.
I move to take care of the housekeeping elements of the proposed code changes in the document, as well as bring back some additional code around violations, penalties, and actions on those violations and penalties, as well as discussion on the every 14 days versus twice a month rental frequency.
And we have a second.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, in that case, Tessa, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner St. Clair,
Yes.
Commissioner Wade,
Yes.
Commissioner Earl,
Yes.
Commissioner Wesley,
Yes.
Commissioner Matusek,
Yes.
Vice Chair Moore,
Yes.
Chair Newman.
Yes.
Motion passed. We will now be moving on to our informational items. We first have a tree report, Robert.
Let's just bring that up. So this is the tree report for the month of January. A total of 4 were removed, 1 was hazard, 3 were dead, and there was a replanting permit of 3.
Any questions? In that case, we'll be moving on to good of the order. Does anyone have items for good of the order?
To say welcome, Robin. I remember when you and I sat in the city council chambers, you were first stepping off of the planning commission onto city council, and I was just stepping on as the junior planning commissioner. I think that was November, maybe 2018, 17, I can't remember exactly, but some time ago. So fun to be sitting here with you again and to really appreciate you being with us with all of your commitment over the years to the city.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with everybody.
Anything else for good of the order? In that case, the meeting is adjourned.